Hey, this is Asbulk, the gaming orc, and I'm going to talk to you about games without damage mitigation are for scrubby gamers. Basically, there's a lot of games out there that have blocks, parries, riposte, counters, and I can counter your counter. These active blocking systems create more skilled gamers and higher levels of gameplay. Most of the time, players can just tab to a character, they hit a button, and there's literally diddly squat that the other player can do to prevent this damage. This is really a scrub-friendly type of game. It allows for a lot more players into the system, but ultimately diminishes the overall skill required to play the games that have these systems. I consider myself personally as an orc to be more of an aggressive player. I like to rush players down. I'm going to give you some game examples with damage mitigation. Some are like the Smite games and other MOBAs, or these tower defense games. I've played these games for a little while now, and I'm not a huge fan of them personally, but they're still pretty fun because they're very PvP intensive and PvP focused. And what I've noticed is there's a lot of heavy turtling that occurs in these games that occur really near the towers in the early parts of the game, for the most part, unless you're like a jungler. The cooldowns are a way for the damage mitigation to occur because basically it's mitigating your damage output because there is no damage mitigation. There's no way for a character to block you. The cooldown is a form of damage mitigation. This creates a lot of turtling because the heals in the game are generally weak and there's no way to block it. So a character can just come in, blow his cooldowns. There's really nothing you can do. I can't block it, can't counter it really. The only way I can do is just sort of move and dodge around him, using WASD. I can't really do anything. DayZ, another real PvP sort of intensive game. Again, it has crafting in it, but we're focusing on the PvP in this video. Again, you can only wear armor to like block bullets. That's really and I can use cover, I guess. So most players can just camp out in a bush, really, and just shoot oncoming players. And the cover is king in this game. And a player that gets the jump on another player is going to crush him if they both have guns, sort of like equal gear, on a very high percentage of the time. So even popular YouTuber Frankie on PC in 1080p agrees that getting the jump, due to lag mostly, is the main reason on how to win in DayZ. Not really the main this game isn't the real main focus of this video, since it has a style of gameplay like shooting, like Battlefield and other first-person shooters, that players want to play like that. Another game I'm going to talk about is World of Warcraft. In this game, you didn't have any real damage mitigation for a very long time when it was first released. Then after Vanilla WoW, arenas came out, and Blizzard sort of focused on arenas in PvP. It came with 2, 3, or 5 players. And pretty much after that point, they gave all character classes gain some type of ability to totally negate damage. Paladins always had a bubble. Priests had a shield that was in discipline. Rogues got a big buff with Cloak of Shadows. This was before the first expansion. And they also had Vanish. Warriors had a cooldown on Shield Wall that got reduced. And Hunters had Beast Mastery, and so forth. In some cases, the negation was a 100% ability. The player presses a button, and 100% of the time, it completely negated all the damage. This is still quite a scrubby level of gameplay because it allows for a passive form of damage mitigation, usually on a heavy cooldown timer. In Pugs, where I would shed much of my orc blood, pickup groups, this was happening until I got friends or other guildmates that could heal me, and then most people just got face rolled. And then the healing was a way for the damage mitigation to occur, so players with the healers just dominated other players that were more organized. That's why back when it was first released, people always jumped on the healers first. The healers could only really heal themselves, but when they have some warrior or rogue or whatever on them, they're getting focused, they would get smoked. And that's what usually happened in the arenas too. People would just jump on the priest and then jump on everybody else, because the priest really couldn't block. He had maybe one damage mitigation ability, then it was over. There's another game I've been playing recently that has a lot of promise because it's in development, alpha, beta, whatever you want to call it. It's called Soda, or Shroud of the Avatar. Currently, Shroud of the Avatar This game could have a lot of potential if it implements a active damage mitigation, but right now it falls in sort of the World of Warcraft, which I just described. It falls into the scrubby type of gameplay, or low-level gameplay. An example is a fire mage casts a spell, puts a dot in the player, but a player has to hit a button to stop, drop, and roll, or put out the fire if he wants. The player could run out of line of sight, hit a button, and negate some or all of most of this fire damage. Or the player could easily cast a spell or ability to block all, some, or most of the incoming damage. And I'm going to talk about a couple games now with a higher level of gameplay and more damage mitigation. Let's talk about another MMO that was created recently, ESO, Elder Scrolls Online. ESO had a lot of potential as an MMO. It's still doing very well. It has 750,000 subscribers. It has a great story for PvEers. It has crafting, combat, and it's all voice acting. It was a very good game. It also has an active blocking system when I right-click my mouse, and that allowed for counters on large built-up attacks. The problem with ESO, though, the designers didn't focus on the PvP elements. They released the game in sort of a semi-beta state. They didn't patch some of these major bugs that allowed for some class imbalances, which always happens. It's also subscriber-based games, and they also raised the level caps way too soon, literally weeks after the game released. If ESO went free-to-play, like most other MMOs have gone recently, that's just how the business models have been going lately, they would have a massive following, and perhaps another game which I consider one of the highest forms of PvP, or a couple other games I consider high-level forms of PvP or PvP-type combat, is Chivalry Medieval Warfare and its sequel, Chivalry Deadliest Warrior. In this game, you have all the strong abilities which I just talked about. Basically, you can block, parry, riposte. You can counter, but you really can't counter a counter attack in the game, but it's still pretty good. And you could dodge too, which is sort of in most of the games, even like Smite or other MOBAs. You can quote-unquote dodge. You can use abilities to sort of move out of the way. But if the player hits you, there's nothing you can do. It's pretty scrubby. Again, in Chivalry, I'm limited by my stamina, so I can't just be blocking, all day. But, some people like in Deadliest Warrior, when you're a Spartan, you can block for quite a long time behind a shield. But even your shield doesn't cover, maybe it covers 180 degrees or 20 degrees within a certain hitbox radius. And that's basically it. The last game I'm going to talk about is Tekken, or basically fighting games like Street Fighter. You have basically a blocking system where you have a high block and a low block. The high block blocks high attacks and medium attacks, and the low block blocks low attacks. If I'm blocking high, I can get hit by a low attack. If I'm blocking low, I can get hit by a mid attack. There's certain advantages to attacking high, mid, and low. And in this system, I could block anytime I want. I could counter, and I could counter your counter as well. So say I threw a punch, you counter me, I could actually try to counter your counter if I thought you were countering me. So I had the highest form of blocking, really. Basically, if I blocked certain attacks, I would get plus frames or minus frames based on these block abilities. And I wasn't really limited by cooldowns like I am in some of these other online games, like MOBAs, ESO, MMOs, stuff like that. ESO really doesn't have too many cooldowns from what I remember. And Shroud of the Avatar has a lot of cooldowns because, again, there's no active blocking system. In World of Warcraft, again, you have cooldowns because I can only charge you every once in a while. But in Tekken, if I hit an ability or do a motion on the keypad or whatever, I activate an ability. So it's a much more high pace, high active, high skill level type of game, in my opinion. Now in Chivalry, people could block. And on the internet, you have between 50 on the low end milliseconds of ping, sort of like a DayZ, where a player hosts a server, they have a server. And then you have up to the high end 300 milliseconds of ping online, where I almost have a half second of delay. But in Chivalry, you could block. It was all done on a server, so the people usually with the faster ping always gives you a higher advantage. But this is done, by putting servers, over the globe or over the country which you're having hosting it for the players, so they can play without any type of lag issue. And this is just a technology issue. This isn't a game system issue. Now let's recap. One system is friendly. It's either has no damage mitigation or a very passive form of damage mitigation. I hit an ability, there's nothing you can do but eat damage. It's pretty scrubby if you think about it. Now the other system is very active. I'm blocking, and guess what? I either negate all the damage I want, or I completely dodge out of the way or whatever, and I'm not penalized. In fact, most of the time, I'm at an advantage. I'm at an advantage because I'm sensing that you're blocking. It creates a more complicated chess match between players. And in games like MOBAs, like you really only have 4 abilities. In World of Warcraft, there was literally a warlock could have 20 abilities. You know, there was many abilities. So warlocks could have at the time, could have a very high level of play. And in Chivalry, you have some attacks. You know, you have most people just spam left mouse button, but the more advanced players actually thrust at you, can do a lot of different types of attacks and really overpower you. And what I'm trying to say is we've moved completely to an online gaming system that there's really no excuse for not having active blocking or countering of counters in a game. Games that don't have this type of system are just flat out scrubby. They allow for more passive and casual players, but for the more hardcore PvPers like myself and other orcs out there who want to have a more active PvP and higher level skill PvP, just to know what type of games and features that you're lacking. And for the game designers, they should consider putting in more active types of blocking or experiment with this. Thanks for listening to this video and on some of my complaints about, you know, just systems in general. And, you know, a lot of games don't have blocking in them. You know, even this game recently I played, Orcs Must Die. It's a single player game. It's fine. But there's really no blocking. I can only slow my opponents down. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe if you want to. Check out the links below. And thanks, and I'll see you orcs later.